So the moon appears to pass by the Earth once every 24 hours and 49 minutes. As well as the Earth spinning around, which makes the moon appear every so often, the moon is also orbiting the Earth, and the orbit of the moon is about 28 days. Now you have to remember that the Earth is spinning on its axis, if that's the North Pole, in this direction, but the moon is also orbiting in this direction. So as the moon makes its way round on one cycle, the Earth will have rotated a little bit, so the moon has to do more than 360 degrees in order to appear at the same place. That's why it takes about 28 days for the cycle to be completed. Now we're going to look at how the moon appears to change shape throughout the cycle, and to do this you need to imagine yourself stood on the Earth looking towards the moon when it's in different parts of its orbit. So here is the Earth, and the light from the sun, let's imagine the light from the distant sun is streaming in down on the top of the page, like so. Now the moon itself, we could think of it as starting at this point here. Now if the light from the sun is shining from the top, then this half of the moon will be in shadow, and this half will be lit up. Now, if you're looking from the Earth towards the moon, the part of the moon that you're going to see is the dark side of the moon in the shadow. So at this point here, what you will see is simply the shadow of the moon, and that's called a new moon. Now, if we cycle through to halfway through the moon cycle around the Earth, again, the light comes from the top and shines down here, and so this half of the moon is in shadow. But if you were looking towards the moon at this point, so the red line represents the direction you're looking, you will see the light side of the moon. So the moon will appear to be full like that, and that's called a full moon. Now at every stage in between being the new moon and the full moon, you get different amounts of shadow. So if we start over here, again, always the half facing away from the sun is in shadow. Think of the view from Earth, and the view from Earth is going to be that you see the left side of the moon in shadow and the right side as the bright side. And then again, on this part of the cycle, this half is in shadow. Looking towards the moon, you'll see that the moon will now appear with the right side as shadow and the left side as lit. And then in the in-between stages, such as here, again, the bottom half is in shadow. So most of what you see from the Earth, remember the red line is looking, you will see mostly shadow with a slither of light. So that will look something like this. And that's called a crescent moon. If we take another situation here, where the moon is again in shadow for the second half, the bottom half, and we look towards it, we will see that the moon will look like it's mostly there and a little bit in shadow, almost like the opposite of the crescent, and that's known as a gibbous moon. So we have these phases. New moon is when you're seeing the shadow side, crescent moon when you can see a slither, half moon here, gibbous moon here, and a full moon here. Now, if you follow the cycle all the way around, it starts off with the new moon seeing nothing, and then it moves from that to seeing a half moon. So the moon appears to grow on this side of the cycle in the first half from being a new moon, which is the shadow, to a full moon. And when it's growing, we say that the moon is waxing. And on the other half, it goes from a full moon all the way back again to a new moon, and we call that waning. So, phases of the moon are the apparent appearance of the moon to be different shapes, even though we know it's a sphere, depending on how much of the moon we see in light and how much of the moon we see as being in shadow. And they are the phases of the moon.